Welcome back, music fans. We are reunited once again after Joseph's concert tour around the world, or maybe just the States. And we are back to go over the tracks of 2003. Before we go any further, though, I want to say the love and the attention has been amazing thus far. Please click that like button, subscribe, do whatever you can to get these beautiful faces up on your page every week and remind you that we have episodes up. We will be up a day later this week than usual, but we're still there, and that's all that matters. After a week off, we're back and rejuvenated and ready to roll through what was an interesting year in music. I don't know if I'll say great. I don't know if I'll say bad, just peculiar. It's the shift depends on what you were listening to at the time as opposed to what the radio was giving you. So it's quite interesting, I think.
Before we get into that, though, Joe, you've been to a number of concerts since we last recorded. Who was your favorite? Who was your favorite in that stretch? You're the only one going and seeing live music between us. So.
Coheed and Cambria.
I figured you were going to see Coheed, but I wanted you to say At the Altar.
No, I mean, there was more energy from the crowd, obviously, for the Used in Coheed and Cambria, and that really does play such a big factor in live music as well. It's not just the artist in the music, but it's also the crowd and their participation, which I think is part of the reason I still, don't get me wrong, I will say, not being a Dave fan, the Dave shows were amazing. The energy in the crowd was insane. It's 30,000 people there to see the same band. But when you're sitting there as an outsider and you've got like the call and responses, because every band that has like rabid followers has some sort of thing where they start playing a couple of chords from one of the fan favorites and people join in, or there's like a nice little call and response at different times. There were just a lot of times where I felt like an outsider at this concert, but I didn't feel that way at Coheed, and the crowd was amazing. And of course I love Coheed. So
it's interesting that we're doing 2003 because I saw Coheed and the Used at Warped Tour in 2003, and you had just seen them. And of course I was supposed to be at that show, but I had to start a new job and not be able to take that night off. But you mentioned that the Used did the Wall of Love, which is something yes. Frank Turner does as well. So I want to ask to get some interaction on the YouTube page. Leave us a comment. Tell us some things you've seen at shows that you've loved, like the Wall of Death or the Wall of Love, because I'd like to see what other artists are doing out there. It was nice for you to say that the Used were doing that. It's something I've really loved about Frank Turner shows. My buddy Chirp and I would stand next to each other, and then since we were about middle, we would part to the other sides, but we would not charge each other to hug. We'd go for other people. So,
I give you props, Joseph. I'm still just not there yet. I had tickets to a show last weekend, and I just couldn't pull the trigger on going. So, props to you. I've been a lot of people going to these live shows and loving the crap out of them. So I'm glad you got to go and enjoy those, even in an environment that you wouldn't typically be in. That's awesome.
Yeah, again, I'm getting a little old. The thrashing at the Used in Coheed really just put me out of commission the next day. And then, of course, sleeping on basically just the ground for 4 nights. My shoulders, my hips, they all hurt quite a bit. So I'm getting a little old.
Sounds like you need some barbecue and Sweetbeard smooth sauce over there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
We had a lot of interesting choices for Song of the Year from the audience this week, and some first-time commenters. And one of them actually helped shift my song because I did not realize it came out that year until after they said it. So
interesting.
Steve Borum gave us Dance with My Father from Luther. Corey Mosier-Kesserling gave us Hey Ya. It needs to be a strong contender due to the Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture line. He said if you have to choose any other song, you have Stacy's Mom by Fountains of Wayne, underrated band in their own right. Grand Theft Auto by Fall Out Boy, Numb from Linkin Park. Jessica Sniateki gave us Unwell by Matchbox 20, Miss Independent from Kelly Clarkson, and Where is the Love from Black Eyed Peas. I for some reason that song I feel like it came out like 40 years ago, and I think it's just because of how much we heard it when it came out. Sherry Nutter Timothy gave us and this is while she was moving, by the way. Sherry was committed enough to give us a list while moving, so thank you to you, Sherry. Calling All Angels from Train, Rock Your Body and Cry Me a River from Justin Timberlake, Bring Me to Life, Evanescence, Red Dirt Road from Brooks and Dunn, Real Good Man, Tim McGraw, and No Shirt, No Shoes, No Problem from Kenny Chesney, Country Heavy List. Gen Pop Benz gave us My Immortal from Evanescence, PIMP from 50, Seven Nation Army from the White Stripes, Leg of Stone from Audio Slave, and I Believe in a Thing Called Love from the Darkness. Kevin Davis, first time commenter, gave us Hey Ya by Outkast. Megan Otis said she wanted to nominate the whole Speaker Box album, but she was going to go with The Way You Move, and that was her track, but also Khalees's Milkshake and White Stripes, Seven Nation Army. Ellen Sadler, our guest for 2004 next week, gave us Crazy in Love from Beyonce and Jay-Z, Bring Me to Life from Evanescence, Are You Happy Now from my girl Michelle Branch, Up from Shania Twain, In the Club 50 Cent, Fighter, Christina, White Flag from Dido, Miss Independent from Kelly Clarkson, Celebrity from Bradley Paisley, and 2 Keith Urban songs, Rain on Sunday and Who Wouldn't Want to Be Me. And she also said Into the West from Annie Lennox and the Lord of the Rings Return of the King soundtrack, which she was just binging Lord of the Rings this past couple of days. So I think that might have also had a little inspiration there. And Paul Brenner, who is returning to the stage later this month here in Rochester with Joywave, he said the Formats Interventions and Lullabies album came out that year. He was a sophomore and that was his jam. I forgot all about the Formats, to be honest. I was totally into them. And then they kind of disappeared from me, I guess. But solid tracks to kick us off. And
for sure, a lot of good stuff there.
I like how different the tracks were too. Even in the people who named multiple tracks, you had a lot of country, you had a lot of hip hop. In my opinion, when hip hop started to fall off, but the pop stuff. But if you notice, it's a little less poppy and a little bit more focused on that country genre, which did go a little poppier, but also the rock, and then a lot of different stuff sprinkled in there. The styles are definitely changing. So Joseph, as we dive into 2003, we are going to start with Greg's debuts and then jump on your tracks.
Real quick, Joe, was it No Through Road? Was that the Hey Ya cover that we were obsessed with for a bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because No Through Road was also originally Dallas Crane.
Yeah.
It had the Dallas Crane song. Yeah.
For those who don't know, because I think I was just trying to Google it to confirm it. No Through Road, he's an Australian artist. He did a cover album. He did like Foreigner's Cold as Ice. But he was, I think, the first of the acoustic covers I saw, and they exploded when people realized like what a track Hey Ya was. But yeah, he was originally called Dallas Crane, but there's a rock band out of Texas who is called Dallas Crane, and he did a hip hop diss track of them, which is hilarious too. I don't know that he's on Spotify. Like I couldn't even find him just Googling real quick, but let me check that right now live.
I'm doing the same.
He is on Spotify. I mean, like he's averaging less than 1,000 listens for these, but honestly, like he's a really fun guy. He recorded a split EP years ago with my buddy John Crocker, who put himself through college just traveling and playing shows and selling things out of the back of his trunk. So yeah, check out No Through Road. Get in on that, listen to him. Also check out John Crocker too, who is another phenomenal like acoustic guitarist who I've seen play in multiple states. But yeah, let's get into debuts now that we've talked about artists who probably released music, but honestly have not the following to talk about. I don't think we'll drive our views down if we're just sitting here talking about the guys I used to post on web boards for them.
Please subscribe for those comments too.
I mean, No Through Road did release something in 2003, apparently, according to Spotify.
Yeah, well, and I think that may have been the covers album, but like one of his tracks was like number 2 on the charts in Australia, but of course he had no radio play here in the US. So that's just how things work. And now that I think about it, he's not Australian. He just had a following in Australian. But yeah, debuts. A Static Lullaby had their debut this year, which is kind of weird because I like never been a Static Lullaby fan, but I think of them as having been around for forever, but not forever, just since 2003. Zwan's one and only album was in 2003. All American. Yeah, All American Rejects was this year. The Rocket Summer, Architecture in Helsinki, who is another like indie band who I feel like has been around for forever, but just since then. The Postal Service, their one and only album was this year, and I'm gonna say it now. Their version of Such Great Heights is 1,000 times better than the Iron and Wine version we all became obsessed with after Garden State.
Agreed.
I beg to differ, but also agree.
And I think also on vinyl, it sounds even better. This was the record. I didn't grab it because I didn't bother with the props today because it's mostly CDs I'd have to dig through. But the Postal Service on vinyl is the reason our buddy Buck bought a record player. He was over one day. He chose this one, put it on. He's like, wow, you can hear the difference. He ordered a record player that night because of hearing the Postal Service on vinyl. Evan Dando, who is the frontman of the Lemonheads, his solo album was this year. Dando's, I don't think, has a mainstream following at all, but a lot of the cool indie bands around this year listen to Dando. He's recorded with Ben Queller, Ben Folds, Ben Lee, so aka the Bens. So notable that he was there. Freeway's one and only album, but like that's in that period where Jay-Z was just signing all his friends. Matthew Good's solo album was this year, a really, really good album. Killer Mike released his album. You can hear him on the last two Outkast albums. Kelly Clarkson's solo album. Kelly Clarkson.
Oh, he was really 03?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Wow.
He's one of those guys who've been around for forever too.
I know. I just feel
on
old.
Tracks and everything. But I think after this success, because he's on Stankonia,
yes,
and then he's on Speakerbox. I think he's both on both Speakerbox and The Love Below.
He was also getting producer credits. I feel so old right now.
Yeah. Fallout Boy, Mars Volta, Junior Senior with that like super breakout album. Metric, who of course I'd love to another Canadian band,
yep.
But also I think Metric might be best known for the cover in Scott Pilgrim. Alexis is on Fire, British Sea Party, another one of those indie bands that I just kind of like has been around for forever, even though I never got into. And then Billy Talent's debut album as Billy Talent was this year. As we talked about previously, they were Pez with two Z's before having to change the name. Story of the Year, Joss Stone, Obi Trice, who I think had been featured on 8,000 albums before releasing his solo album, and Dresden Dolls, Amanda Palmer, band, and of course the drummer for that is, I believe, currently the drummer for the Violent Femmes, and he's just a great addition when you see them live. So not like the best year for debut albums, but I think a really, really interesting one, especially with the number of bands that were one and done. I mean, Zwan and the Postal Service. So
to be honest, that Zwan album is almost better than anything Smashing Pumpkins put out too, which is absolutely incredible.
The Zwan album's really fun. It's one of the ones I have on CD that I didn't want to dig through, but yeah, it is a fun album. That Zwan album there.
That was my senior year jam.
I think there's a couple that I have on here that I'm going to be bringing up. So I'll mention them when we get there, and then you can remind me if I just checked out there for a moment or it actually said.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate the deep dives that Gregory does each week on these debuts here, because he pulls some stuff up that I don't think a lot of people realize, or even, some people only notice bands when they get big, but he's got not only the tracks, but the albums and the singers and the previous bands and releases. So I love it, Gregory. Thank you.
Well, and part of the problem, and I'm sure I missed quite a few this year because I think this is the fastest I ever did the research. So there's a couple of bands I only noticed because when you look on Wikipedia, they list debut, but only for some tracks. So I think probably 3% of the debuts I read actually list them as debuts. So it's kind of like, oh, I don't remember seeing this band. But of course, the way Wikipedia is sourced and everything, there are bands I'm like, I don't think this is a debut album, but I don't remember seeing them listed. And then it's like their 8th album.
And actually, one of my songs of the year is from a debut album that you didn't mention. So we shall get there.
Oh, perfect.
But no, I love the deep dive. Honestly, there were a few things there I didn't even know. So, Joseph, take us on this journey that you went on yourself for 2003.
Okay, so I decided to basically what's old is new again sort of thing. I was feeling like the last few years I've kind of let my list get a little out of control, numbers wise, and
Mhm.
then I felt like I was just speed reading a list of good songs. So I forced myself to go back to just listing 10. And so that way I have a little bit more time to basically let them breathe as I talk about them a little bit more and what they kind of mean to me. And so I do want to, before I get into the list itself, specifically shout out Joss Stone's cover of Fell in Love with a Boy, because I mentioned it when we talked about the White Stripes. But when I was going through just top 10, it doesn't make it. But I mentioned I would shout it out because it's better than the White Stripes version. So I just want to make sure I get that in there. But starting with these might even be chronological based on the way I did my research this week or this year. Starting with the Rocket Summer. Basically, it's just a single person. It's Bryce Avery. He's done a bunch of solo stuff since, but this was the debut as the Rocket Summer. And when I was, what was I, junior high this year, 8th grade? This entire album, Calendar Days, just spoke to me a lot. It's a little bit on the softer side, a little bit more poppy of the stuff I was listening to at the time. But I think between this one and his later release, or his next release that we'll talk about in 2005, probably, I think both of them sat in my disc changer for many years once that one came out too. But specifically, there are a couple songs on here that have always resonated with me. The first being That's So You. It's a beautiful song, beautiful love song. And then Mean Thoughts and Cheap Shots, which I just think is a little bit more fun on that album. But if you're not familiar with the Rocket Summer, go check them out. Still releasing music as of earlier this year. So I didn't know that. I lost track.
I didn't know there was one earlier this year. I knew it was like he'd released one in like 2018 or so, because I remember eating pizza by myself, like texting you, Joe, or like because it came across my release radar, and I was like, the Rocket Summer. He grew up and he evolved like as the Rocket Summer. It's still good, but it's slightly different because, well, he's not a 17-year-old kid anymore. So
yeah, I actually think the one that was released, the song I heard released this year, Shatter Me, is probably my favorite The Rocket Summer song in a really long time. There might be one or two off of Hello Good Friend that's better, but really interesting. And I'm going to talk about maturation of music here as we go too. So next, I'm going to talk about the All-American Rejects. This was kind of, this is interesting because this is sometimes listed as 2002, sometimes listed as 2003. I think, Dan, you mentioned them last 2 weeks ago, but last year. This album was really important to me, the self-titled, throughout junior high and early high school. I have a lot of memories attached to this entire album. I think this year when Gregory got the chance to go to the Warped Tour, I did not get to go. I was still a little baby at that point. And he knew how much I liked the All-American Rejects and brought me back a poster. Nice. And me being the terrible brother I am, never ended up hanging it. And it ended up getting crushed by stuff in my room, and I felt like such an asshole.
That's a brother thing. I have a suitcase of like posters I got at concerts that I've never hung up. Some of them have since been destroyed. And
so not specifically just concerts.
I'm glad one of the Dilcox brothers brought props today.
This is just a quick sampling of posters I have sitting under one of my bookshelves that have never been hung up. There's 3 more under there too. I'm just really bad about hanging things, apparently.
Hey, it happens. Remind me to never send you a picture.
I know. It'll just sit in whatever you sent, and it will never get hung up.
Send the picture to Amanda. She's the picture hanger. So
true. And so I think last year, Dan, you mentioned Swing Swing. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk about Your Star and Why Worry instead. Your Star, I think, is where the vocals are the most melodic for me. And then Why Worry, I think, is the most fun to me. So I kind of went both directions on that. But yeah, this just throughout junior high and high school, this album specifically meant a lot to me, but those songs were probably the most notable. Rise Against released their second studio album this year. There's a couple bands on here that I'll talk about that I got into later on. Rise Against wasn't one until I started listening to until I got into college. And this was kind of one of my first kind of bands into the heavier side of rock and stuff, especially like the revolutionary kind of people like Fight the Power. And I ended up seeing them twice in the same week one time. It was insane. But this album has two of my favorite songs they ever released. But specifically Like the Angel is such an interesting song because you listen to the lyrics and it sometimes doesn't feel like it matches up with the music because the music's very fast, heavy punk. And then you listen to the lyrics and you're just like, oh, okay, interesting. And that's when I first realized that I could love both heavy music and the lyrics could still also make sense and be something that spoke to me. Because
how they lured me in was Swing Life Away came out. I'm like, oh, I love this. It was when I was like my singer-songwriter. So I picked up the CD back and you just go buy a CD. And I popped in. I'm like, well, this is different than Swing Life Away. And then I was hooked ever since then. I think I've seen them like 9 times since then.
Dan, for me, it was the reverse. I bought that CD because of that song, but because that song is nothing like the album, it instantly put me off and I've never returned.
So I was going to talk about Anberlin next, but I'm actually going to jump a couple and talk about Finger 11 because something similar happened with Finger 11, but not to me. So this album was released in 2003. Interestingly enough, it's a self-titled, but it's their third album.
Yeah.
And One Thing was released and got a lot of radio play and stuff. And my father really liked that song. And so he went out and he bought the album. And
very different than that.
Oh, yes. It's the only song that's even remotely like that. Everything else is a lot heavier, a lot, I don't know, for me, a lot better. But he comes into my room one day. He's like, you ever heard of Finger 11? I was like, yeah, I know like a song. He's like, yeah, me too. And the rest of the album is awful. Do you want this CD? And I was like, yeah, I would love that CD.
Not Canadian staple Finger 11.
Oh, yeah. And it's just, the whole album is just,
it's really
it's banger after banger if you like that type of music. But if you got into that because of One Thing, most people didn't even realize that song and Paralyzer were the same band when Paralyzer was released a few years later, because their music is just not One Thing at all. But off this album, I specifically thought I fondly always think about One Thing. Obviously, I do like that song. Stay in Shadow and Therapy. Those 3 songs to me are kind of like define that album. It's so much fun. What's the next one? I don't think I pulled up Anberlin. There's some things I wanted to talk about, but oh well. So Anberlin released their debut. This is one of the ones I think you might have missed on your debut list.
I did. I honestly thought it was like their third album. So
yeah, I thought they were around a lot longer.
Apparently, this was their first album. I didn't realize that either.
I feel like I saw them on tours before that year.
Maybe. I don't actually know. Like, we'd have to go back in time and be like, when was Anberlin established as a band? Because they could have been. I know some bands toured quite a bit before they ever actually had the ability to release anything. Well, Anberlin, this is another band I discovered years later and went back through their discography. And so this one doesn't have much that a lot of people would recognize because this one didn't get any real radio play. But for me, We Dream in Heist and Naive Orleans are both like really fantastic songs. Naive Orleans is one that just kind of scoops me up, I guess, when it's played. I get lost in that song every time it plays. This album is just really beautiful. Shine Down, another debut. This one, another band that I didn't get into until college. And then you go back and you're like, oh, this album is just so good. from beginning to end. Some of the highlights: Fly from the Inside, Better Version, and then of course the one everyone knows off this one is 45.
Bottom of the bottle.
Bottom
of the bottle.
Oh yeah. And this, one of the things I loved about it was this album was released with both the original version of 45 and the acoustic version of 45. And I know that happens, and I've even talked about some that it's happened before with Breaking Benjamin. Their second album, they released two different versions of. Actually, no, that's their next album. They haven't done that yet. Anyway, but it's so cool for me to hear those side by side. It's now super common. Every punk band has a reimagining of their older stuff where they do it acoustically. So it's super common now, but at the time I don't really remember seeing that too often. And so that really stuck with me with that album, going back in time and listening to it. The Darkness also released their debut this year. And I Believe in a Thing Called Love was everywhere at this time. This song is still to this day one of my favorite songs of all time. When it comes on, I cannot help but get up and dance and sing.
Are you sure this album wasn't actually released in 1986?
It could have been. It was pulled straight from the 80s, but dropped on us in 2003. And in college, instead of studying or doing anything for finals freshman year, my buddies Josh, Evan, and I decided to form an air band. And we posted videos online of us air banding songs. And I Believe in a Thing Called Love was the first one we ever did. And I still go back and watch it at times. And it makes me laugh way too hard every time because it's so dumb. But obviously, a lot of fond memories with that song. Coheed and Cambria released their second album this year, which always throws me off the order of them because this album is called In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3, but it's album number 2. And this is where they started to first kind of gain popularity, right? This one has both A Favorite House Atlantic and Blood Red Summer on it, which those were the first songs I ever remember hearing from Coheed. I don't think I heard anything from their first album at all on the radio. And this one I really love. This might be my favorite of the first 5 album series from Coheed, because this has such an interesting progression that they show musically and production wise. I went back and I was listening to their whole discography leading up to the concert last week. And if you listen to album 1, sometimes it's even hard to hear Claudio sing because the mixing just wasn't that great on it. Like the levels don't match. They're not like well done. And he's only singing up in his nasally voice that is his iconic voice. But this second album, their mixing gets a lot better. They add in some more interesting elements musically, and Claudio starts to sing a little bit more in his regular voice as well, and kind of starts to mix it up. So musically, this is where you just start to hear the progression of Coheed. But yeah, Blood Red Summer and Favorite House Atlantic, my picks off of that one. And we get to my final 2. I saved these ones to last, so not quite chronological. But Linkin Park had Meteora this year.
Yes,
and we've talked
such a
we talked about we talked about Linkin Park quite a bit with the debut, specifically, and how much that album meant to me. And I do think that one still means more to me, but I think Meteora is far and away the better of the 2 albums. And I do think this is kind of where I lost track of Linkin Park for a little bit, because from here they started doing a lot more just straight up rock stuff, and it got away from the hybrid nature of the rock rap that
and Fort Minor.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
The Mike Shinoda Chronicles.
I know. I'm not a fan. But I mean, it's not bad. But this is another one where I point to some of the maturation and transition for the bands, because, you know, they named Hybrid Theory Hybrid Theory because they wanted to mix styles. And I think on this album, they take it even one step further. Right off the top of my head, Nobody's Listening has a lot of Japanese inspired flutes in its backing, which I don't think you were hearing in a lot of either rock music or rap music at the time. And so they were just taking even more elements of different genres and different influences, and they were smashing them together, and also making still some of the coolest music videos. Breaking the Habit, that music video is one of the coolest to this day that I've ever seen. It's so well done. The animation's amazing on it. So those are my two picks from the Linkin Park album. And then, of course, my number one for this year is going to be Something Corporate. And lo and behold, more progression. And that's the reason why. North was released this year, their follow-up to Leaving Through a Window. And it was really interesting because I always liked a couple of the songs off of Leaving Through a Window better, but North is I like as an album better. Oh, yeah. And a lot of it is because of the progression in writing from Andrew Mcmahon. Yeah. And I want to read a couple of the quotes from the critics regarding this album. Andrew Leahy: shunning the drunk high school girls and classroom bullies for a thoughtful rumination on love, celebrity, and the steady approach of adulthood. There's some filler, probably more than the band's debut. The group has showed a maturity to move past the majority of their Warped Tour brethren, which of course then they broke up the year after that. So
but they gave us Jack's Mannequin, so fuck yeah.
But Something Corporate's better. Alternative Addiction wrote that upon hearing the first chord, fans would immediately recognize McMahon's growth as a songwriter. Jesse Lord wrote, North leaves fans with purely good music to enjoy, and likes the blend with which the blend in with the band so much better, because the McMahon's piano specifically. And so critically, this was very well, like highly regarded compared to Leaving Through a Window and even a lot of the other punk pop bands that were out at the time. But they split up the next year, and interviewed a couple of years later, Josh Partington had admitted that the band was frustrated with the lack of commercial success because the album didn't sell very well. And he's quoted to have said, "We had put in all this hard work and we were doing everything we could, but it felt like certain parts of the whole machine weren't necessarily working in our favor." And so that's one of the reasons that's one of the things that led to their disbandment. But there's all these things that you can clearly hear in this music that it's like, yeah, they got better on this album, and you can hear it in Ruthless, 21 and Invincible, Only Ashes. Like, you can hear the growth in the music, in the songwriting. And I absolutely love this album. It means so much to me on a personal level, which is why my song for this year is going to be Ruthless, Something Corporate. But, if I could nominate an entire album, it would be this album.
Such a great album, such a great track. I honestly, I left Something Corporate alone this year because I just wanted to hear your take on it.
Well, that's my take. A little bit more probably than the fans wanted to hear me talk about Something Corporate.
To be honest, I'm more of a traditionalist when it comes to writing, but Andrew McMahon is one of my probably top 5 songwriters. From the first time I've ever heard him, I'm like, wow, lyrically this is amazing. But when you hear the progression with the pianos being thrown in with somehow slasher guitars and everything else, because he also writes all the songs, produces it. I mean, it's along the lines of like Prince and Lenny Kravitz when it comes to like the musical genius of it all and putting it all together, and not just writing the lyrics, but also the music and to be able to be on the instruments. Like, he's just such a wild musician that people I really don't think know about or appreciate enough.
And I'll probably end up completely skipping Jack's Mannequin in this discussion.
I will not, so that works.
I really don't like it nearly as much as Something Corporate, but we'll come back to Andrew McMahon again in his solo stuff, specifically the Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness, because I think there's even more to be said about like chronicling his life through those bands and the stages he was at various points.
He's
and being
also
able to
really
just hear
fun
that
to
come
party
through.
with. He's a blast. So,
Is he?
yes.
I've heard the reverse. So
Really? No,
Yeah.
well, maybe it's timing wise, because like when I did, it was early on. But definitely went out a few times and had an absolute blast.
and I've heard like some guys who know Matt Nathanson, who he toured with for a long like stretches in the mid 2000s.
Oh, he's a giant douchebag.
Yeah. Well, and I'd heard like he's great to party with from like the people who were friends with Matt Nathanson. But I have a good friend who her and a friend at a bar, and he was a complete asshole to them. So, and that was during the Jack's Mannequin piece. And I know when we talk about Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness and his life progression, that's something he's addressed in his later days too. So that'll be interesting.
Definitely. Now, Greg, we are on you, my friend, and I'm wondering where you're going to take us for 2003.
All right, so I was talking to Joe about this, I think yesterday. Days blend together for me, but it has to be yesterday because I didn't see him for a while. But 2003, this is like the first down year for me we've had in a while. And I'm not sure how much of it has to do with 2003. I was excited for 2003 because this would have been the end of my junior year of high school and the beginning of my senior year of high school. And like I had a really good time, but I think part of it was some of the guys I was hanging with were like really into like Cash Money Southern hip hop like type stuff, and it's fun like in a group of people, but it was nothing that ever hit me in a personal level. And I think the other part was, I mean, 2002 we talked about, like it has a number of my all-time favorite albums. And I'm still like mourning a loss, so that music was still what I was listening to heading into 2003. So none of this really hit me. Like I listened to the Juliana Theory album that came out this year, but it never hit me. Like it was never anything. There's a couple tracks I was like, oh, you're good. I'm not going to listen to you ever again. And that's, I feel like, how 2003 was for me. Is I was just going to keep going back to that Beck Sea Change album. I was going to keep going back to Ben Queller and Bright Eyes. So, but there were some albums here that are probably my favorite albums from the artist. The first one being that Unwritten Law album that year, like was my favorite Unwritten Law album. Before I Go and Rest of My Life, which I believe are the openers of that album. That's my best 2-track stretch of the year. Then Seeing Red comes up, and then Up All Night.
Yeah.
I listed Seeing Red only because that was a song that introduced me to Unwritten Law. It was a video my good friend Trevor was like, oh, you would really like this. And he was right, but it might be my least favorite track off that album. And it kind of ruins this. Like if Callian or something was in that, it could have been a great 4-track stretch. Seeing Red's a great song. It's just like in that stretch, it kind of ruins it for me. Joe mentioned the All American Rejects. I've seen them live twice, and they sounded exactly the same both times. And of course, it was like 2003 and 2012 or something. I saw them live. They're just one of those bands. They are like it was 2 guys signed to a record label, put with a band. And they've had some success and longevity with that, so good for them. But My Paper Heart, Happy Endings, and the last song was my favorite track off that album. Yeah. Rocket Summer, Joe mentioned Saturday, and That's So You were my 2 favorite off that album, but that album is just great. Canadian band Stars released an album this year. It's not my favorite Stars album, but if you've never listened to Stars, go listen to Stars. They're kind of fun, dancey indie pop. Life Effect is the best track off this album. A couple years from now, we're going to get into the Stars being my favorite album of the year. Ted Leo and the Pharmacist had an awesome album this year. Hearts of Oak was the album. I'm a Ghost, High Party, and Hearts of Oak is my best 3-track run of the year. The album just doesn't let up, though. It's a really, really great album. Postal Service, the District Sleeps Alone Tonight. Such Great Heights and Brand New Colony. I think The District Sleeps Alone Tonight and Brand New Colony were both singles from that album as well, but I think it slept on because of the success of Such Great Height and the success of the cover.
It was also an odd album to come out that year. Like just looking at everything else that was released, it was very odd, and I don't think it was appreciated enough until many years later.
Yeah, and I think it's just Brand New Colony, though. It's just a brilliant track. Might be my favorite Postal Service track from the one album we get to pick from. Cat Power had a good album that year. Speak For Me, which features David Grohl on both bass and drums. And He War, which also features David Grohl on drums. David Grohl plays drums on 3 tracks and then bass on 1. Eddie Vedder sings vocals on one of the tracks. Like the weird cameos that Chad Marshall has on this Cat Power album, just insane, but really good album. American Hi-Fi.
Yes.
My 2 favorite tracks off that album, I think, were Teenage Alienation and The Breakup Song. The Breakup Song was another, I think, soundtrack track around that time. Teenage Alienation didn't get much play, but it's really fun. That Matthew Good solo album, While We Were Hunting Rabbits and Near Fantastic, are 2 really great tracks. Cursive's Art Is Hard, which is the best Cursive album, I think, and like just was everywhere for a while. But just a beautiful, brilliant album. A Gentleman Caller, The Recluse, some Right-Handed Sleight of Hand are some standout tracks, but you can't go wrong with anything on that album. M Ward, my favorite M Ward album, came out this year. Sad Song. Sad Song. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm tired. Involuntary and Helicopter. Involuntary and Helicopter's 2 tracks back to back that are just brilliant. And Ward is so good. My favorite White Stripes album this year, not controversial to say, I think it's a lot of people's favorite White Stripes album, but I just don't know what to do with myself. The Hardest Button to Button and Well It's True That We Love One Another is just brilliant. Godsmack, I Stand Alone came out this year on that album. Great track from Godsmack. Yes, had an album this year, and Maps is on that. Back to Ted Leo, he does a wonderful cover that's Since You've Been Gone that goes into Maps. Joe and I did Since You've Been Gone in karaoke one time, realized we do not know the Kelly Clarkson version. So when he switched to Maps, we switched to Maps. People booed us.
Yeah, we just didn't realize there was a bridge in Since You've Been Gone.
So, which our mother, we listened to that Ted Leo version so much the summer that cover came out. She was in the grocery store, heard the Kelly Clarkson version, and told the poor girl at the grocery store that she ruined this song by that guy her son's like. So, she was so proud of herself that she knew something this poor lady didn't. That's our fault. Fountains of Wayne. This was Stacey's mom, but Hey Julie, I think, is the best track off that album. My good buddy Chirp loves this album, and it's a go-to of his in jukeboxes in the bar. So if you do not like Fountains of Wayne and Chirp is drunk in the bar, I'm sorry. Ocean Avenue from Yellow Card. I know like it's the one everyone knows, but it is the best Yellow Card song, I think. James Addiction had a reunion and an album come out this year. Superhero is just a great track off that. The Decemberists had a pretty great album. Los Angeles, I'm Yours, which is another soundtrack one. The Soldier in Life and Red Right Ankle. Honestly, all 3 of those are pretty heavily featured in soundtracks throughout the years, but just a great album from Decemberists. DMX, Where the Hood At and Get It on the Floor were my favorite 2 tracks off this album. Saves the Day had an album this year. I remember reviewing it for the newsletter I wrote in high school and giving it 4 pineapples because that's who I was at that time, where I couldn't do stars. I did pineapples, which makes sense for a teenager who was trying to be cool, I guess.
Stars are overplayed.
Yeah. Well, now I don't give ratings at all because just enjoy shit. Driving in the Dark is my favorite track off that album. I mean, I gave it 4 pineapples back then, but it's my least favorite Saves the Day album, and I was kind of disappointed in it at the time. I feel like I should go revisit it with some time. And then 2 albums I want to talk to together, Atmosphere and Brother Ali released albums this year, and I think they're both nearly flawless, like no skips type things. My 2 favorite hip-hop albums of that year, probably 2 of my top 10 hip-hop albums of all time, both coming from Rhymesayers, the label Atmosphere started. Bird Sings, Why the Caged I Know, Got a Lot of Walls, In My Continental from Atmosphere are probably my favorite ones off that one. But the Brother Ali one, 18 tracks, and I have a hard time picking any of that. I mean, it opens with with a View and Champion, which are just brilliant. Prince Charming is this great tongue-in-cheek, like love track about a guy who ends up being like a crazy stalker and can't see he's the issue, and it's played straight, and it's just such a brilliant commentary. So if you don't know Brother Ali or Atmosphere, start with the two albums that came out in 2003 with those. They're brilliant, and they're Midwest hip hop too, so it's slightly different than what you're going to hear on the East Coast or West Coast, but just so good on both ends. Outcast, The Way You Move on that double album is my favorite track of those.
Mine too.
I know like Roses and Hey Ya and all that, but like The Way You Move is just so fucking good. And the fact that that one was a hit single and it's on the Big Boy album, like good for Big Boy. He has not stopped releasing music. It's just steady.
Plus, he gave us Sleepy Brown, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Big Boy was at Kaboo the first year we went.
He just doesn't stop working.
Nope.
And a couple like indie releases. Arab Strap had Fucking Little Bastards and The Week Never Starts Around Here, which are both really great tracks. And Her Space Holiday had Luxury of Loneliness and Girl Problem on the album that was released that year, and those are just two brilliant tracks. My shortlist for the year, though, Avalanche off that Matthew Good album is just brilliant. Off that Cursive album, Driftwood, A Fairy Tale, which is kind of like a retelling of Pinocchio, and done in just this brilliant way. And then a couple covers, which sucks that once again I'm putting covers in my shortlist, but M Ward's cover of Let's Dance from Bowie is hard to say because Bowie's was brilliant, but this is a superior version. It slows it down, and it just really shows like how heartbreaking and beautiful the lyrics are to Let's Dance. And done, sung and played by M Ward is just brilliant. It's one of those, if I hear it, I listen to it again on repeat instantly. And then of course Fell in Love with a Boy. Like, I mean, just it's hard when the two cover tracks are superior to the originals, and the originals were great. In the Cold Night, my favorite White Stripes song of all time, I think. So, but my song of the year is off that Brother Ali album. It's Forrest Whitaker. It's called Forrest Whitaker, and it's just I mean, it's the most played Brother Ali album on Spotify for a reason, but just like an anthem of loving yourself. And that was my jam back in high school. It's my jam now. It's just so good. I mean, Brother Ali, he is albino, and he related more with the black kids growing up than the white kids, because the way, and it all relates to the way the black kids teased him. And like he said, the black kids teased him to alienate him, whereas the white kids were just to be mean and hurtful. So it was like, it was childish teasing versus hate is what it boiled down to. And so just like, and he's so much fun to see live too, if you get a chance to see Brother Ali and Atmosphere live when they toured together, especially.
He's also just such a humble, down-to-earth dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I can't speak enough good things about the music, especially this album that came out this year. But yeah, my song of the year, it's gonna be Forrest Whitaker. It's just a brilliant fucking track.
Love it. Actually, I'm gonna have to go back and revisit some of that because I haven't listened to that in quite a while, to be honest. So thank you for bringing that up.
I actually really like that I cut mine down to just 10 because I feel like we didn't overlap all that much. I think that's a lot more fun.
Yeah, I didn't cut mine down to 10, but I did cut mine down for what everybody has said. And I think I'm actually down to about 25, which is better than my usual 60. I have 21 Questions and Many Men from 50 Cent. Really not a 50 Cent fan by any means. However, Many Men was actually pretty decent. It was off a mixtape before it hit the album. 99 Problems from Jay-Z. Then we come into Switchfoot, which didn't find out they're Christian rock until much later. Doesn't really matter to me either way. If I like music, I like the music. But they had Adding to the Noise, Gone, Meant to Live, On Fire, This Is Your Life. The Walk to Remember soundtrack actually brought me to Switchfoot as a teenager. And I'm going to be honest, the soundtrack bangs, but so does Switchfoot. Great stuff there.
I think it's funny that you didn't catch on at We Were Meant to Live as being Christian rock, because it's all about
Well,
Finding a higher
these were my
purpose.
heavy weed / whatever substance I could get my hands on. So I'm just gonna vibe with whatever's around me. Years. Kanye gave us College Dropout. We had Slow Jams, Jesus Walks, Through the Wire. Through the Wire is just such a great track. To Live Quality also gave us Quality Control that year. Amazing from Josh Kelly, which love that track. It's even better acoustic. We already talked about Linkin Park, what they gave us there, but Easier to Run, Faint, Line From You, Somewhere I Belong, just all great tracks. I think I listen to all of them daily at some point in my playlists. And then we had Evanescence came to be, and just really a banger of an album, to be honest. Amy Lee had just a hell of a voice. But Bring Me to Life, Everybody's Fool, Going Under, My Immortal. I just can't say enough about that album. I wasn't a big fan of the songwriting on the albums after that. And, once her and Sean Lee from Seether broke up, it was kind of like, he really did her dirty, you could tell. But it got kind of lazy too. Chariot from Gavin DeGraw, and I'm omitting a song right now because it's going to make my top 5, but that was a great debut album that year. Collide, She Says, Perfect Time of Day from Howie Day. Love that album, love the artist. Jack Johnson, this is more for my wife. Cookie Jar, Taylor, The Horizon Has Been Defeated. Big Jack Johnson fan. It was actually Jack Johnson and Matchbox 20 and Seether were the only bands that my wife listened to when I met her. So they are staples in our house.
It's interesting you bring up Jack Johnson because Joe mentioned the story about our father and Finger 11. Years later, he heard a Jack Johnson track and asked if I'd heard the album and if they all sounded alike or if it was all the same. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, it all sounds the same. He did not realize that I meant Jack Johnson sounds exactly the same with every track.
Oh yeah,
so
literally.
He experienced the reverse that he was not happy with. So the dangers of buying CDs, folks, if you've only experienced music through streaming, you're missing out in that. Buy a CD and hope everything's good.
So
I remember when she introduced me to Jack Johnson and got like 2 songs in and 3 songs in. I'm like, is this all the same song? Or
yeah, so after he was burned with Finger 11 and then Jack Johnson, although I think it was the next Jack Johnson album.
It was the second Jack Johnson, yeah.
He'd start coming to me and asking me about stuff. Like I remember later on, he asked me about Teenagers by My Chemical Romance. And he was like, hey, I like that one, that Teenagers Scare the Shit Out of Me song. I was like, okay. He's like, does the rest of it sound the same? Is it like the same style, but not like the same? I was like, yes, actually. Yeah, that's an okay one to buy. You'll like the entire album.
So then I had Naughty Girl from Beyonce, Creatures for a While from 311, which is one of the few tracks after their self-titled that I really enjoyed. Dead on Arrival from Fall Out Boy, I Did My Time from Korn. Blink-182, I despise this album when it came out, but Down, Feeling This, I Miss You, they're songs that years later I really did appreciate. One of my favorite bands with one of my favorite singers, Seven Dust, had Enemy and Seasons. Love those tracks, love the band. Petey Pablo was out there with Freak a League. A lot of people seem to forget about that, but it was in heavy rotation at many plays. Girls Not Great from AFI, Give Up the Grudge from Gob, which played at my wedding twice. Black Eyed Peas actually had quite the album with Hey Mama, Where Is the Love, Let's Get It Started, and a lot of other tracks on that one.
This is the first album with Fergie, right?
It was.
Yeah.
And it was one of 2 or 3 with her, and then they just disbanded yet again, and then she showed the world that she really can't sing that well. I Hate Everything About You from 3 Days Grace. Can't stand their sound, but the song was everywhere, and it got young high school kids into the genre. I'm Loving It from Justin Timberlake, only because the second I read it, I couldn't get it in my head, so I had to make my list. Alicia Keys from Diary of Alicia Keys, If I Ain't Got You and You Don't Know My Name. God, that voice is just so beautiful. Into You from Fabulous. He sampled a great track and made it his own. It's 5 o'clock somewhere from Alan Jackson. Shout out to my grandma. Little Moments from Brad Paisley, the only country song Lauren and I ever bonded over because she couldn't cook. She's a great baker. Milkshake from Khalees. It was already said, but it's got to be said again just because that was everywhere. Lumity, Never Leave You. I absolutely love that song, and I never should have. Because it's an awful song, but oh my God, if it's not an entire vibe. In the Shadows from the Rasmus, great band out of Finland. They actually got MTV play that year. I just don't think they really caught on with people, but if you have never heard In the Shadows, check it out because it's just a great alternative track. Only One and Way Away from Yellow Card. Raining on Sunday from Keith Urban. Ellen, that should make you smile. Rubber Band Man from T.I. I just wish that T.I. wasn't T.I. Show Me How to Live from Audio Slave. So Far Away from Stain. So Says I by the Shins. Shoots Too Narrow is such a great album. It's really hard for me to pick one off there. I really love that band. But I got to go with that. Stupid Girl from Cold. Again, it was also on Walk to Remember. Hands Down As Lovers Go from Dashboard. Just one of my all-time favorite bands. I know that Chris Crowell gets a lot of shit. I know that a lot of people rip on them. I absolutely love his songwriting and voice. There Goes My Life by Kenny Chesney. As a dad, you definitely listen to this song a lot differently. I can say that for sure. It's one of those when it comes on the radio or on my shuffle, I definitely start to get contemplative. Turn Me On by Kevin Little. When this was requested at a wedding I was DJing, I don't think I'd ever been so happy at a wedding, even my own, to play this song. So that was great. White Flag by Dido. It's unfortunate how quickly she came and went with her career because she was a very talented songwriter. Workers Song from Dropkick Murphys and X Gonna Give It To You from DMX kind of round out my outside bubble. And then I have my top five. I Don't Want to Be from Gavin DeGraw. The song was everywhere. One Tree Hill theme. I'm a One Tree Hill fan, Stan. Dance With My Father from Luther. I absolutely love that song. I love DJing weddings where that is a song that people dance to together with a loved one and the tears go and all that. I absolutely love that. I mean, the voice of Luther is one you can't replace. Hey Ya from Andre 3000. Simply, it was everywhere. All Falls Down from Kanye West. He finally brought some hip hop back to a genre that was teetering on the edge there with some real good production on that first album. He'd been a producer all those years before, and he finally did his own thing. And to be honest, that's really the only Kanye album I'm a big fan of, especially with those features. And Dare You to Move from Switchfoot. But my track of the year actually goes to Hey Ya from Andre 3000. I know it's listed as Outcast everywhere, but let's be legit. They split.
Yeah, it's two solo albums listed as.
The reason being for that, my pick of that song isn't necessarily because it's my favorite song of the year. It's definitely not. Dance with My Father is. You don't go to a party without hearing it. You don't go to an event without hearing it. It's everywhere. Shake It Like a Polaroid Picture is said by people who don't even know what a Polaroid camera is. So it's just that iconic. The odd thing is Andre 3000 is in my top 5 for lyricists of all time, and I think this is one of his worst tracks. But as a song that came out for the year, it stayed on the charts longer than most modern songs did. He did what he set out to do, especially with them breaking up, and then he just decided to do features for like John Legend. So good for Andre 3000 doing his thing. That was my track of the year.
That song's crazy based on like, if you listen to it, it doesn't make any sense with how like upbeat and happy the song sounds.
Yeah.
And it's just not.
It's an all-time example of like the aesthetics of the song versus the lyrical content of the song and the contrast, which is why it became such a popular acoustic cover track. And there are so many great ones. I mean, I mentioned the No Through Road one, but the one the Blanks did for Scrubs is up there as well.
Matt Weddle from Obadiah Park.
Yeah.
Cover.
I mean, there's countless, and it's just because it's all about the vibe and the mood as opposed to what's actually being said.
Yeah. Back to the Dido thing, though. She released an album in 2019.
I know, and nobody cared. It sucks.
And in 2013 and in 2008. So she's been releasing steadily, but I think that's how it goes, especially when she had an album that got no play, and then she was sampled on an Eminem track, so the next album got a lot of play, and then she vanished. And that's unfortunately how the music industry works oftentimes. So,
well, I mean, people don't realize, but I release
more videos.
I mean, I release YouTube shorts almost every day, and some get 5 views. So I'm right there with you, Dido. I feel you. If you want to collaborate, I shoot many shorts together. I love your voice. I think you're amazing. Natalie Imbruglia, if you're listening, also, you're the only artist ever slide my DMs. I'm here. But yes, I love Dido. I think she's a great songwriter. I've actually listened to a lot of stuff that she released, and I wish she would get more credit, more play. I think I might make it a point to start sharing more Dido. Just to
lead the Dido campaign.
I think I'm going to.
You lead the Dido campaign. I'm going to lead the No Through Road campaign.
I think we're onto something here. Before we depart and head into 2004, where we are greeted by an amazing woman, Ellen Sadler, do we have any shout outs for the evening?
Nope, nothing from me.
Joseph just gives a shout out to being too damn old for concerts. I'm right there with you.
I know.
It happens.
But we're planning more. I'm hoping the 16th for my buddy's birthday, Newfound Glory. We're going to see Dave Matthews again in October, I think.
More power to you.
Alanis Morissette's on the 22nd of this month. I'm trying to go see. So
nice. Gregory, what about you, my friend?
Not as much thrashing going on, though.
If you're not thrashing at Alanis Morissette, Cat Power's opening for that tour, right?
I don't know if they're at. I don't know if there are two bands that are opening for Alanis, and I don't remember that being one of them.
That tour got all botched up because it was postponed after everything. So then the contracts and stuff got.
Yeah, because it was supposed to be an anniversary tour.
Yeah, she's touring with different artists in each city, I believe, because I know her Rochester show was much different than it was supposed to be.
Garbage.
Oh, Garbage. Okay. I saw an ad today for Cat Power opening for one of her shows. So like she must be doing different openers. Like, I mean, Garbage will be fun to see.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, Cat Power is. She's just not important enough to get a headline.
That's shitty. That's shitty.
That is shitty, which is weird because the advertisements I'm seeing are Cat Power. So I have seen a couple of Garbage, but
that makes sense that you're getting Cat Power and I'm getting Garbage.
Gregory, any shout outs, my friend?
No, or yes, I don't know anymore.
Shout out to
I mean, if you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated.
There's a start.
I mean, we mentioned earlier about being afraid to go to shows. I didn't go see the Mountain Goats partially because of work, but I was hesitation anyway because the venue that they were playing in specified masks are required because the band requested it. And I'm like, no, masks should be required. Vaccination should be required. Unless you have some medical reason not to get vaccinated, get fucking vaccinated.
So the Dave Matthews tour is requiring everyone to show proof of vaccination or negative COVID test within 48 hours. And two of the band members got COVID the night they were supposed to open.
Yeah, I mean it's no joke, and sadly, I mean, we know this, but
Spoon canceled a show on their tour because the venue wasn't going to require vaccination, and they booked another show that sold out for that same night. So like, we want to go see music, we want to go do things, but like, cases are on the rise again, variants are coming stronger and stronger, and it's because we're not doing our part to quell it, to contain it, and it's there. And for those who say, oh, they rushed the vaccine, I'm like, the technology that involved the vaccine has been developing for many, many years. This is how science is supposed to work, folks. So
moth in the room.
Now I have a couple shout outs this week. One being Backwall Comics, the other being Black Market Comics. I was in a live feed yesterday for a call and response, nice little auction, and both were great, had great books, great prices. Got down to shipping and brass tacks this morning. Awesome people to deal with. Told them I'd give them a shout out. But most importantly, as we head into the months of September, October, November, December, the months where depression and anxiety often increase the most for individuals, please take care of your mental health. If you need anybody at all, reach out. Even if you want to leave a comment in the comment section saying just, hey, shoot me a message. That's cool. Or private message any of us, or me. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but seriously, take care of your mental health. Take care of you. If you need to take a pause, gather yourself, get good with yourself so you can be good with everybody else, or just the world that you exist in. You're worth it. You need a moment, whatever it is, just de-stress, decompress, and it's easier said than done, but at the same time, you're worth whatever that effort is. So please do that. It does matter. It's not just a slogan. It's not just a hashtag. I got a call the other night at 11:45 from somebody I hadn't talked to in 5 years because they simply need to talk to somebody. And that's not tooting my horn. That's just saying, do it. Don't be embarrassed. Just fucking pick up your phone for anybody.
That's an open invitation on this side too. I'm sure Gregory feels the same. Even if I don't know you, maybe that's better for you too. That's not getting back to anyone anyone in your circle because shit, I don't know you. So go ahead and hit me up, send me a message. I don't care. If you see this video and you need somebody to talk to, does not matter who, when, hit me up.
And piggyback off that, yeah, obviously I'm always open. And I closed the newsletter this past weekend with the story of Daphne Unger, a professional wrestler who recently killed herself. And I've seen a lot of stories from especially like indie women and how important she was. And one of them put a long post on her Instagram, Allison Kay, who's just a brilliant wrestler, brilliant person. And she told the story about she'd recently had a conversation with Daphne that was really well. And so you always see that check on your friends thing. Please don't beat yourself up if you talk to someone and don't realize their depression. Like a lot of these people are so good at hiding this. And so you might not be able to spot it. All you can do is be there and be open because for all intents and purposes, what I'm hearing, like people who'd interacted with Daphne shortly before she'd post a distressing message could tell nothing was wrong. There was like she was the same loving, giving, caring person she'd always been. And so you're not always going to be able to see it. All you can do is be there when someone reaches out for you. So it's going to be stressful and sad and heartbreaking when you lose someone. Don't add to that by beating yourself up over it because you didn't see it, because so many of these people are so good at hiding this. Just be there when you can be there. And if you are feeling depressed, if you're beat up about something, reach out. Someone in your life wants to be there for you. National Suicide Prevention, is it .org, I think is the website. They're there 24/7. Like the hotline's there 24/7. There's resources, reach out.
Full facts. And that's not a somber note to end on. That's a positive one because you're worth the help and you deserve whatever it is you need. So, gentlemen, 2004 waits us. We'll be joined by Ellen. I'm hoping she has some Celine Dion to kick our way. If not, we shall see what happens, and we will feel her savage vengeance. So, as we close out 2003, the journey continues, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Same.
See you, Dan.